Welcome to week 11 of English 414. I hope everyone is doing well. Excuse me. I'm taking a few minutes today just to orient you to this week, give you an overview of what's coming up and what you can find in the week 11 folder here in Blackboard. Okay, so first I should let you know that I just posted an announcement this morning about your forum analysis reports being graded. So I've gotten through all of those and I've given feedback to everyone except for there are just two people who there was an issue with your submission, so you should have an email about that. But for most everyone, I was able to grade your assignment, put your grade on Blackboard, and give you comments directly in your forum analysis report. And I did try to give constructive feedback that might help you understand that assignment, but also transition into your ongoing revision. So please do take the time to look over those comments and let me know if you have any trouble accessing them. I tried to email everyone their forum analysis report with my comments so that if you're having any trouble accessing it in Blackboard, you can have it directly in your email. But please do reach out to me and let me know if you have any trouble finding those comments. I want you to be able to access them. Okay, this week our big activity is working on the literature review assignment, and this is a biggie, which is why you have had 2 weeks to work on it. And I do hope that everyone's gotten a start on this project, at least getting through understanding what a literature review is. And I have had some very good questions come up. People have reached out to me to ask if they're understanding the literature review idea correctly. And that's perfectly acceptable, and I'm glad that some of you have reached out to me because this is not a genre that we're familiar with unless we read and write research writing. This is a subgenre, a subtype of writing that fits into the larger category of academic writing. And the more that you read academic writing, the more you get comfortable with the literature review. So if you are someone who has read some academic scholarship, this might be familiar to you. But for most of you, I'm assuming you haven't had too much exposure to this subgenre, and I don't know that any of you have had to really write one before. So if it's a little confusing, that's probably okay. And it's good to reach out to me and ask me for any clarification that you need as you move forward this week. So please do remember that this assignment you should be reflecting on what you've learned about literature reviews and what you've gleaned from the readings I've provided, and also you will be completing your own literature review. And I wanted to provide this picture here, which I found, which I think is a really accurate representation of how I write literature reviews in my scholarship. I don't think that you would have this many sources for your project. This is quite a few number of sources, maybe for a bigger project. But you can see that this writer has grouped these books into piles and labeled the piles. So the idea here is that all of these books contribute to this person's project. They're all telling this writer something important about the project, but she's been able to say, well, there are a couple different subpoints that have come up in the literature related to this project, and she's actually physically grouped the books and put them in stacks to separate them and labeled each one. And this is what I told one of you as we were exchanging ideas about how to write a literature review. I said, for me, it's a very physical process. I have to take my books and take my notes and take my articles that I've printed out and annotated and kind of group them all over my floor. So if you're a spatial learner like me and this person, this might be a helpful way of thinking about how you go about doing a literature review, just using sort of the spatial metaphor to understand how a literature review works, because the point is to make some claims about what the literature is saying. And so you're really kind of reading the relevant literature and stepping back and organizing it and arranging it in a way where you can say the literature collectively does a few different things. And here we can say that this this writer maybe is saying that the literature does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things, and then she's going to explicate those by pulling quotes and paraphrasing from these specific pieces of literature. So if this is still a completely fuzzy concept for you, or you're stuck on part of it, reach out to me this week and let me know how I can help you work through this. The expectations are, with every submission excuse me, you're making for this class, the expectation is going up a little bit in terms of the precision of what you're turning in, the depth of what you're thinking about, and some of you are just doing a fantastic job of doing really careful work in this class, very thoughtful work, and I really appreciate that, and I can tell that you're learning a lot. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is related to another assignment you have due this week. You have just a short blog assignment to work on, and this will be in relation to Chapter 16 of The Craft of Research, where the authors talk about conclusions and introductions, or actually they talk about introductions first and then conclusions. So this is some information that I've given you, some of you, in your comments, but I thought it would be good to repeat and provide all of you. So let me talk about conclusions first. This is a good sort of thumbnail way of concluding a piece of writing, whether it's a big project or a little project. This is pretty rudimentary, but it will get you through. If you're one of those people who gets kind of to your last main point and you've written it and you're like, how do I wrap this up, or how do I shut this essay down? You can follow this formula. So it's a 3-part formula. The first part is saying, know what? What do you know? What are the things that you've been able to explain or claim or assert in the body of your essay? So this is kind of where you're just doing a summary of what you've already said. That's what you know. So after you say you know what, then you say so what, and this is answering the so what question. Okay, you've given a repeat of your main points, or kind of a summary that repeats the main thrust of your article, but in order for a conclusion to be satisfying for a reader, you really need to move beyond just paraphrasing yourself. You need to connect the what you've written, your points, to some sort of bigger picture. Why should it matter to the reader? And this is something that you've been reading about in the Craft of Research all semester. So that's next. And then the final part is your implications. Now what? Okay, so it's great that you're making this assertion. It's great that you can tell me why it's an important assertion, or why I should care about it. But what should we do, your readership, these people who are part of the conversation, what should we do with this information now? So it might be that you suggest that there are practitioners or people outside of academia who might be able to use this information. You might say that your information that you presented in this research writing raises more questions, or it raises a different type of question that you didn't expect at first. So that the idea here is that you're starting with focusing explicitly on what you've already written, then you're kind of addressing why this should matter to the reader, which is kind of a step beyond the actual document itself and what you've already argued, and then you want to get into that sort of larger implications area with the now what point of this. So you can see how the conclusion sort of spans outward from your piece of writing to a much larger community and addressing that larger conversation. So I hope that this is helpful to you, and if you have any questions about it, let me know. And the last thing that I want to just quickly address is some tips and ideas I have related to introductions, and some of this is related to what I was reading in your form analysis reports. Some of you found essays that did not seem to have a precise, clearly stated thesis. This is something that you will find sometimes in academic writing. I will tell you right now, I am not a fan of this. If you become a brilliant scholar and publish widely in your area somewhere down the line, and you want to have obscure or missing thesis statements, then by all means do that. But what I find is that not making your thesis explicit or clear to your reader is just really, I think, a rude move and a disservice to your reader, unless there's some compelling reason to not put your thesis right up front. But for the most part, a thesis just helps your reader understand what they're going to be reading. And if they're going to be reading pages and pages and pages of your writing, it's only fair to help them understand what your point is, what your purpose is. And this is a little bit of a departure from the craft of research. I believe that the authors say in a different chapter we've already read that that sometimes this can just, it spills the beans and then people won't continue to read. Well, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. We don't access academic writing just for the one or two takeaways, and that's all we're interested in. Academic writing is about explaining points, proving your ideas, using evidence, explaining things thoroughly, and I think that for the most part, people are willing to read what you have, whether or not they know your thesis up front. And actually, I would say it's more likely if they know your thesis. I get really irritated if I'm trying to read something and I just can't figure out why I'm reading what I'm reading or what the point is until the very end. I think that that's just not a good move. So do have that nice precise thesis and work toward that as you're working on your overall revision. I think that what's even better than just a thesis is a thesis statement that also includes some reference to a problem statement, which is described in chapter 16. You'll read more about that, or your research question. So it's entirely fine for you to say, I started working on this project with this question in mind. Now, some of you are writing in disciplines where you're not going to want to use first person I, but nevertheless, it's okay to state a research question or a statement of the problem that kind of leads you to feel like you need to make this thesis. So I think that those can be effective strategies for front-loading your information and providing a really useful and interesting and helpful introduction for your readers. And then the final piece of information is that this is just a suggestion on my part. I have found that I really prefer to write my introduction last, and I think that it can really save you a lot of turmoil if you are someone who struggles with introductions, or you might write your introduction and by the time you're writing your conclusion is saying something somewhat different than your introduction did. So for me, I find that it's more time effective and more just less stress inducing for me to just start writing what I know or start revising where I need to revise, and then go back, and after I have the bulk of my piece of writing together, once I've worked through my conclusion, then I go back and I can put that introduction up front, and it really comes together quite easily and quite nicely, and I can think more about how I can engage my audience from the beginning with caring about this topic so that they'll continue to read. So I don't think that the book necessarily suggests this. I think there's a part that we've read in the last few weeks where the authors say that this is potentially a bad idea, but I found that it's been very helpful to me. So this is your opportunity to sort of explore these strategies for research writing, but I do think that there is something to be said for keeping that introduction until last. So you won't be necessarily working on your conclusion or your introduction this week because you're working on this literature review assignment. But these suggestions you can keep in mind as you read chapter 16 of the Craft of Research, and you can keep them in mind as you return to your revision and work on your own introduction and conclusion. Okay, thanks everyone.